Okay, good morning. That was a great day yesterday for the first day, and it was great to have that opening school meeting. Now, I remember I explained to you that normally the speaker would be down here, and when they step on the stage, we want immediate silence and respect for that person. Obviously, Chaplain Ganung is not getting around quite as easily now because he's in a boot from his ankle surgery, and he's on crutches. But let's do a practice here just so we can get it right. So I want you all quietly talking among yourselves, and then let's practice as when Chaplain Ganung comes out, we will be immediately quiet, and then he will start. Okay? So you're talking.
Morning. You guys are great. These actually become cattle prods. I got one for each aisle in case you don't sit down, but no, I would never do that. You're wonderful. I practice nonviolence except on the football field on Saturdays, but no, I want to welcome you again. I know Headmaster Ms. McMullen welcomed the lower mids and to school, as well as the mids, the upper mids, and our PGs, of course. And we have a lot of new faculty. Welcome them. And everyone who's returning, faculty and staff, we're back together. This is the first official morning meeting. So we're together. More in the community, I like to think of us as a family. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Reverend Ganung, or Mr. Ganung. I'm the chaplain at Taft. And this is my 7th year at this incredible school. It's a privilege and an honor to be the chaplain here and as a teacher here. And I know you feel the same way as a student. Never forget this. You're among the rare few, not only in this country, but around the world, who have the opportunity to receive a Taft education. It's an extraordinary opportunity. Never take it for granted. And with this realization, recognize the mature moral and ethical responsibilities that we all have to fulfill here as members of this family. So let me start, though. I want to start with a story about my own life. I grew up in the modest but wonderful home that was literally built by my father in a small town. It's not far from here, just about 40 miles across the border in New York State. Now they call it a hamlet. We never call it a hamlet then, the hamlet of Gatona. You pass by it on 684, you don't see the beauty of it, but there are reservoirs and there are lakes and ponds, streams and brooks, places where I used to hunt and fish. I know every corner of the land, even what is no longer a secret place where Chief Gatona was buried with his wife and son who were killed. Actually, he died grief-stricken. They were killed in a lightning strike about 300 years ago. So Gatona, the Ganung family is actually from the Gatona area for 350 years. It's really my hometown. However, when I left for college in Boston, I never returned again except to visit. And since then I've lived everywhere from Maine to Florida to Wyoming and Montana to a couple of different Hawaiian islands. So being here at Taft is the closest I've come to home in the past 35 years. My father came from a large family that had little money after the Depression. So like many people, he had to make it on his own. So he tucked away the small savings that he accrued while serving as a first sergeant in both World War II and the Korean War. Remember, men and women don't go into the armed forces to make money, but to serve their country. But with a little bit of money that he did make from his government paychecks, he sent them home to my prudent mother, who put every penny aside to realize their dream. And when he returned home after 2 wars and in between 3 seasons of playing professional baseball for the Philadelphia Athletics farm system, he and my mother bought a few acres of land in Gatona, and with help from his brother and his best friend, they literally built our house. All of them were skilled carpenters, plumbers, masons, and electricians. And when I was 4 years old, they turned the swamp behind our house. My father turned the swamp behind our house into a pond. He had a friend who had a construction company with bulldozers and backhoes. Now, this is something you couldn't do today because of today's environmental regulations. And obviously, for good reason. You'd be destroying delicate and vanishing wetlands. But it was legal back then. It was a time when people threw their garbage out of the car window without even thinking about it. They dumped washing machines and kitchen sinks and other large appliances just a few feet off in the woods, off of country roads in the woods, without a conscious thought about the eyesore they're creating or the pollution they're causing Mother Earth. Well, the pond my father built was just about the size of a hockey rink. This was by design. And being an electrician, he set floodlights up in the tall weeping willows and the maple trees that lined the contours of the pond. This meant we could play hockey late into the night. We used to lace up our skates in the laundry room, step out the door on the frozen snow, and skate down about a 100-foot long, 45-degree incline, and then jump over this rock, this sizable rock, onto the ice. Most of the time we made it. In the summer, though, the cattails, the wildflowers, the weeds thickened around the pond, and my brother and I felt like we were explorers in Marlon Perkins' Wild Kingdom. You probably don't know what Marlon Perkins is, but it's the Steve Irwin of our time. And he was a zoologist, and after the Sunday night football games, we always look forward to Wild Kingdom. We imagined in our pond that there were crocs and gators, and even the creature of the Black Lagoon was slithering around in the mucky depths. Well, that part was surely fiction, but in reality, we did live to catch brilliant blue and green dragonflies, tadpoles, golden shiners with brilliant red fins on our fly rods, and massive bullfrogs that croaked so loud on hot, steamy summer nights that we couldn't get to sleep till the symphony of crickets lulled us into the dream world. But every day, the great excitement was hunting for the giant snapping turtle that lived at the far end of the pond under a flat rock, which was the roof of this belligerent behemoth's home. One day, my brother and I decided to attach this metal hook to an old broomstick. And then for the next several days, we reached under that rock. We tried to pull that old snapper out of its lair without much success, until one day, we got him about halfway out, and he scared the dickens out of us. You heard that word before, dickens? So he looked like some kind of grumpy reptilian monster from the Mesozoic era. We estimated him to be about 100 pounds. Of course, we were, really small, and we grossly over-exaggerated, but he was big, and we knew he could surely lop off a few fingers with one quick strike if we got too close. But what I found most fascinating of all in our pond were the water snakes. Not far from the snapping turtle's den, in an old rotten log, submerged near a small brook that emptied out into a stream behind our house, the water snakes would bask in the sun when the weather was warm. These snakes were I'm not kidding, they're between 4 and 5 feet long and as thick as a good-sized bicycle tire. They were dark reddish-brown and sometimes black, with bands that made people who didn't know much about snakes mistake them for copperheads, which are poisonous. But these aquatic snakes had no poisonous venom. But boy, they sure had a nasty bite that I experienced on more than one occasion when I reached my hand down and tried to grab one behind the head. I couldn't convince my younger brother to do it, although I got him to do a lot of other stupid and dangerous things. Sometimes we get this long pole stick and fling one of those gigambus snakes onto the lawn, where our 3 dogs that patrolled the jungle-like banks with us would go crazy, barking and chasing them until they slithered their way back through the tall grass and back into the pond, disappearing under the decaying timber that was their watery abode. Every now and then I would find their molted skin near the flat rock where the old snapper lived. They more than likely rubbed themselves against the rock to shed their outgrown skin. I always wondered what would happen if that large snapper saw one of those huge snakes by his burrow. Unfortunately, as much as I wanted to see some kind of wild confrontation, I never did see such an encounter. But one day I asked my grandfather, I asked him why snakes molted, and he said, they do this because their old skin becomes stretched and worn out, becomes filled with parasites. And in order to continue to grow into a healthy, larger snake, they need to shed their skin every now and then. Then a little later, I learned in grade school from the wonderful naturalist who used to visit our 3rd grade classroom every 2 weeks, where he brought all kinds of wild local animals with him, that all animals shed their skins, even humans. Good old Mr. Grierson told us that dead cells are continually coming off our bodies. I remember looking down at my hands and my arms to see if I could see any cells flaking off, but I didn't see them. But from the bottom of my 3rd grade heart, I believed him. I loved Mr. Grierson, and I treasured his visits because he often brought live snakes with him. There were about 12 different kinds of snakes in New York State. One day he asked our class who we thought was slimier, a snake or a person. Naturally, except for some wise guy in the back of the room, we all raised our hands, saying that snakes were slimier. Then he asked my friend Billy to come hold his hand against the blackboard. And as he was holding his hand against the blackboard, he reached down and pulled an old pillowcase out from his worn duffel bag, and he untied this knot, took out a 3-foot-long hog-nosed snake that had dark brown blotches spread down its back of its thick body and this upturned snout that it used to burrow down into the ground to catch toads and other prey. He held that old puff adder, and they call him a puff adder because the hog-nosed snake flattens out, kind of looks like a cobra almost. He held that old puff adder with the head and the tail, placed it against the blackboard, held it there. When Billy's holding his hand. And then he asked Billy to take his hand off, and you see all this slime on the imprint of his palm, and everyone goes, "Ooh, Billy." But it's not just Billy. Billy's out in Colorado right now. He can't hear me. My best buddy. But after that, he removes the hog-nosed snake. Nothing at all. So on that memorable day, we learned that human beings are slimier than snakes. But not really. We have a divine core within us. We just have to get to that, and that's what we're trying to get to here. As I got older and studied philosophy, religion, and mythology, I learned about the symbolic power of snakes and how in India and Southeast Asia and the Native American traditions and in Aboriginal cultures, that snakes symbolize something positive. They symbolize spiritual power, awakening, enlightenment. They're not considered to be evil and beguiling as they are portrayed in the biblical tradition in the West, and they are certainly not slimy like human beings. But, the mythology of the snake is a story for another time. My point this morning, in this morning meeting, is this. Morning meeting is an opportunity for you and me, for every teacher, for every visitor who comes to Bingham on Tuesday and Thursday to shed our metaphorical skin so that new growth can take place in our lives intellectually, emotionally, physically, because cells are literally coming off our bodies, just ask Miss Monty, changing our physical composition right now as I speak. But don't look at your neighbor. You won't see them flaking off. It's a little bit too dark in here. And most importantly, morning meeting is an opportunity for new growth to happen in the spiritual dimension of our lives. And by spiritual, I mean that intangible, unmeasurable part of ourselves that we often refer to as the heart and the soul. That can't be measured under a microscope, but I believe it's the very core of our being. But I think you can tell when you are shedding your spiritual skin because there are certain subtle but visible signs. For example, you feel a little bit more open, receptive to exploring new ideas and ways of thinking. You're more mindful, you're more aware, you're more sensitive, you're more compassionate, you're more loving and kind toward others. And I think you're a little able to sense more easily when someone is hurting or struggling in some way, and you find yourself wanting to help them for no other reason than because you care about them. Even though a few days ago you weren't sure if you really liked them that much, or maybe a few weeks or a month ago you thought you hated their guts. But this happens when you molt and grow more deeply into a new set of healthy and shimmering spiritual skin. Of course, it doesn't happen overnight. I don't think any great things do. But in stages, little by little, just as in the Zen saying, a bucket of water fills drop by drop. Or when you're out, another Zen saying, when you're out on a misty day hiking, you don't notice that you're wet. You actually think you're dry until you come in after hours in the woods and you realize that you're thoroughly drenched. This is what can happen in morning meeting if you come into the inquisitive mind and an open heart. And after a few weeks, a few months, a year, 2 years, and for a lot of you, 4 years, you will be thoroughly drenched in both spiritual and practical wisdom, ready to go forth into the world, into college and beyond, to pursue the things in this world, as St. Paul says in the New Testament, the things that are pure, that are lovely, that are gracious, that are noble, that are good, that are true, that are excellent. By the time you leave, you will have shed your skin multiple times because most young snakes need to shed their skins about 24 times a year. Older snakes, it's people like me and Mr. Caesars. Sorry, we're coaching together, so I guess that's all right. I might not be allowed in the library again, but older people like me still need to shed too. Realize that if you're here for 4 years, you will have shed your skin 100 times or more. But here's an important caveat. If you're not molting, you will surely be imprisoned in a very narrow worldview that will become suffocating and debilitating. intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. And you will become extremely claustrophobic and myopic. You'll be unable to see the big picture and the deeper meaning of things. So shedding our skin is about being open to and embracing change that is inevitable. Change is the way things have been since the beginning of the world. You don't want to keep those old worn out skins, do you? Shed them. Do this by trying, again, Mr. McMullen shared this, new things, meeting new people from different cultures and backgrounds, sitting at a different table at lunch, going down the hall to meet somebody different in the dorm. And taking advantage of all the things Taft has to offer. So many things: community service, gospel choir, global service and cultural immersion trips that go to countries all over the world. There's a new trip coming up to Brazil in the summer. You try an instrument if you don't play, or if you're an athlete and you haven't acted before, try acting. And there are so many clubs you can join. This is why you came to Taft. This is why you're alive, isn't it? So when you come to Bingham Hall, Tuesdays and Thursdays, be ready to shed your skin and learn something new that will change you for the better, at the level of the heart as well as the mind. Remember, our school's founder, Horace Dutton Taft, was all about educating the whole person in mind, body, and in spirit. Now, briefly, just a few more important rules about morning meeting. I think these could also be called habits of mind. They're very important. I'll remind you about them as the year goes along, if for some reason you happen to forget. First and foremost, morning meeting is our sacred time together. It's different than assembly. You can get confused, which meets on Wednesday and Saturday. This is our sacred place. This is our hallowed ground. Many of you consider yourself religious. Some may think of yourself as spiritual and not religious, and some of you may think of yourselves as agnostic or atheists. However you identify yourselves, one thing no one here can deny: we are all of us, on a journey through life, and we all have big questions to ask, and that's what we do in morning. It's the big question. For example, who am I? Where am I? Where am I going? What's the meaning and purpose of my life? What is the good life? What will bring me happiness and happiness to others? In morning meeting, we also address moral and ethical issues in a broad way through, as Mr. McMullen again mentioned, through religion, history, science, math, the arts, music, poetry, so forth. Morning meeting, this is a must. And I came out of there, and it'll be students next week. Tommy and Maddie will be here on Thursday. It'll be different outside speakers. But when the speaker comes up here, respect is absolutely important. And even more than that, I think of reverence. You don't have to do what I do. I always try and see the divine nature of people. I try and find God within each person. But if you're not religious, just look for the best qualities in the person and realize that you can learn from everyone. You don't have to agree with me or a student or an outside speaker, but we can learn from everyone. And when you enter the doors of Bingham on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, just think of it this way. Think of though, even if you're not religious, you're entering our sacred temple, cathedral, mosque, or meditation hall. This will help you elevate your heart and mind so you can put you in a certain space. And then come early, sit down early. If you want to leave on time, I know you want a few extra minutes. Of course you do. You want to have coffee, tea, you want to have fellowship with your friends. If you get here on time, try and keep it to, sometimes outside speakers go a little more than 20 minutes, but we try and keep it to 20 or less. So that's your part. If you can do that, we can work together. And then just a few things in the chaplain's office, things that are offered through the religious life. There's Focus, our Fellowship of Christians. There's the JSO, the Jewish Student Organization, and Jewish students who want to go to Yom Kippur services this Friday night or Saturday morning. You can be excused from class for High Holy Days, so please speak to me because I take students to the synagogue in Southbury. So please speak to me. I will be emailing you. And then I have meditation. I'll let you know when that starts up again in the Taft living room, and a council for religious and spiritual life, and anyone can be a part of that. And then there are a variety of churches in the area. So let me know if you need to get to a church. Some of you are interested in confirmation at the Catholic Church, St. John's. So those are a few of the things. Hopefully you've shed at least one set of skins today. And so go forth. Have a great day, great beginning of the year. God bless. Take care.